All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today, Design to Delivery, ROI Blueprint for Master Planned Communities. Thanks again for attending. We will have a Q&A slot at the end, so just ask your questions in the chat. If we don't get to all of the questions, we do have your information and we will make sure that we follow up with y'all at the end of the webinar if we don't get to those questions then. So I'm going to start by just doing some brief introductions. So I'm Jordan Wotovich. I am a senior account executive here at TraceAir, based in San Antonio, Texas. I've been with the company for about 4 years now, and have experience working with folks that are master plan community developers, home builders, kind of everything in between. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today with Monica, and I will hand it over to her and let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Jordan. Well, I'm Monica Smith-Onstead. I'm the president, founder, and CEO of On Place Collective. We're a placemaking firm. We help master plan community developers and builders build more connected communities through amenity planning, lifestyle design, and strategic marketing. So a little about me, I've been in the business now, home building world for more than 20 years, mainly specializing in amenities and lifestyle with developers. And about 4 years ago, I left my developer I was working with and created On Place because I saw a need in the marketplace where builders and developers needed to understand a little more about how to create connected places. So today we have about 100 employees across the US. We have offices in Florida and Texas, and we work all across the country. I also host a podcast called Smith Lane, where we hold conversations with top industry leaders about creating places and community building. And you can find more about us on onplace.life.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Monica. All righty. Well, we are ready to get into our questions for today. Want to start it off by just just how do you define placemaking today in the master plan community context? And then what makes a community feel truly connected and authentic?
Thank you, Jordan. Well, placemaking has been around for a long time, right? We typically think about it in the urban design landscape, and it hasn't been around as long, really, for master plan communities, where we've started coining the term. We've been doing it a long time. We just didn't name it that, right? So I think it started being named that in about probably the last 10 years. But really, it's a human-centered approach around designing and activating spaces to really help foster community and integration and a strong sense of place, right? So simplified in my mind, it is understanding your buyer, what they want to do, and then designing for it, right? Like every little aspect of it. So if you take an example of a playground, right? The user of that space, we would tend to say that the user is a child. But is the user really the child? Is that the end user who you're trying to attract? I would say you're really trying to attract the caregiver, right? The parent or, the nanny or whomever, right? Who's bringing the child to the playground. So why not design it to help them feel more comfortable at the playground, right? Better seating, shade, visibility to the play structure, all of those type of things. So when I say knowing your buyer or knowing your user, like it can go down to the little details of like, where's the person who's going to come to this playground, where are they going to sit, and how can I entice them to stay a little longer, right?
Perfect. Yes. Absolutely makes sense. Thanks so much for explaining it in that way. And then, I'm thinking when you begin a master plan, there's so many different things that you have to think about. The vision, who your buyer is. What are those key ingredients for turning that vision into a place that people actually love to live in?
Yeah, I would say that, it's building a community is actually super simple, right? If you look at it from the lens of who you're building it for. And I'm going to say this over and over and over in this webinar today. So I don't know, maybe there's a drinking game around it or something, but it really is that, understanding, who your buyer is and what they want to do is really key. I mean, that is the fundamental piece of it. If you can look everything else through the lens of your buyer, and it's going to tell you so much. I mean, this is true for home design, amenity design, entry features, really looking at the lens through the lens of what your buyer wants. Of course, listen, you also need to understand geographical area, what your competition is doing, but I want you to keep your eye on the prize, and that's your buyer. Who
Mhm.
do you want to come to this community and buy the homes, right? That's what you're trying to do. Every developer I know is in business because they want to sell homes, right? Like they want to make a profit at some point. So the best way, in my opinion, to do that is really get very granular on who your buyer is. But as always, the devil's in the details, right? So making sure that you're creating this on paper is one thing, but actually executing it is a different thing. At the end of the day, I think that from an amenity perspective, for example, you know, you can have a $2 million budget or a $42 million budget. And I personally think you can make great communities with either budget, right? It's about, again, your buyer, what their affordability rate is. And, we have to take all of that into account when we're creating amenity spaces, because what's
Right.
that operational cost long term? How is that going to affect the assessments, the community assessments, and all of that? So, at the end of the day, some clients come to me and say, "Oh, we only have a $2 million budget." And I'm like, "Well, I think we can do a lot for 2 million, right?" It might not be as grandiose as somebody with a $40 million budget, of course, but as long as we're tailoring it to what that buyer is attracted to, then we're going to be just fine.
Sure. So let's talk about that. You mentioned a couple different things, making sure you know who your buyer is and then following through with that vision from start to finish. So, first question I have for you there is what are the steps that you take to determine who your buyer really is and what they want?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Jordan, because it takes a ton of research, right? So it's not just about, pulling, I'll tell you, sometimes, we'll have clients. I love all of my clients. Sometimes they'll say, "I want this amenity," right? And it's like, well, but does your buyer want that amenity? So we have to back up and go through a ton of research. So I'm not going to name all the platforms here, but there are several different platforms that we use to pull data from. We also look at industry standards like the America at Home study. They do a great job. They've been doing studies, I think every year, every 2 years, something like that since COVID, to really understand what the amenities that in the home product and all of this is. It's chock full of great information, but we take that lens as well. So understanding the data, and now depending on the client I'm working with, a lot of them have their own research that they've done, right? Because they've been doing this for a long time, right? And so we take their data, some outside data, and then crunch it with some of the industry surveys and things like that that are out there. As well as from a company perspective, we have about 45 communities around the country where we have lifestyle directors on site. And we take that data as well, that real-time data where surveys from our real-time residents, what they're using, which amenities they're using, what programming they like, all of that. And that really feeds into understanding what the demographic is.
Sure. We know that these communities, right, can last a really long time. Building a master plan community can take anywhere from, 10 to 20 plus years. And a lot of things can change during the course of that time.
Yeah.
But how do you make sure that the vision stays the same?
Well, again, another great question. I think it is understanding, again, we got to understand our buyer and we've got to understand our brand, but you have to create real understanding of the brand within your team and as from internal and external, right? So, like, you have to have some pillars. You've got to understand who you are from that brand and make sure that you are reinforcing that every single time. So, your decisions from a developer perspective should always run through that brand lens, right? So, you have your demographic, you've created the brand based on that, and now your decisions can run through that brand. But, 7 years down the line, you're still building and things are going to change. Your brand's going to update. You're going to have to update your pillars, your guiding principles and all of those things. But you've got them, you can't hold, you don't create them and just keep them in your desktop, right? You got to send them out into the world and make sure that everyone knows about it. Your buyers as well, because if you
Right.
pass that along to your buyers, they will help understand. I mean, there's some great communities out there, some great ones I've worked for, some of the great ones that I haven't. They're amazing, where they've done a really good job of instilling in the buyer what the community is all about. And then what happens then is the buyer takes it to the next level, right? Because in placemaking, we want the community involved as well. But when we just have dirt, there's no community yet. So as the community members move in, they are going to take your brand and it's going to kind of morph into something else. And you have to kind of watch out for that because that's okay, right? It's okay. But yes, that would be, I would say, you really have to go over the brand, make sure you're living it with internal, external, and team members as well as your residents.
Sure. And I know we have, a good amount of developers on the call today, so I think it would be really beneficial for them to understand, how can developers better translate buyer demographics into land planning decisions, for example, like product mix and layout.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, get your marketing team involved. A lot of times I see where marketing is off to the side. I'm dealing with land planners, great people, wonderful at their job, all that, but we tend to go directly to what we can touch, see, and feel, right? Which is the land, right? We tend to go to that hard stuff first. And, we really need to start with marketing first. So the strategy piece behind everything. So a lot of times, I'm telling you, I mean, it's crazy. Jordan, you're probably going to be like, no, that can't be. But honestly, like a lot of times, our clients' marketing is not even the picture. Sometime I had one marketing person tell me, like, she's like, I'm the last to know. I mean, no, that's not the way it should be, right? Your marketing should be upfront, helping you understand who the buyer is, right? And again, I'm saying this over and over, but then they also need to help you build that brand and understand, because once you have that, that can tell you everything you need to know about the product type, right? So if you know you're going to have families and you know they're going to be, young families, okay, well, maybe I'm going to do more pocket parks because they're going to want them within walking distance or pretty close to their home, right? So maybe it's more of a pocket park. It's not one huge amenity. Maybe there's a smaller amenity, but there's pocket parks because if you have a toddler, you know that you probably want in the afternoon to get them to a park to run all that extra energy out, right? So, thinking from that mindset to say, if I know who's going, or, we don't have a crystal ball, so you can't be sure completely. But if you have a good idea of who's going to live there, everything you do can be designed around that, right?
Yes. Yes, and I think that's so important of what you said at the beginning is getting marketing involved from the beginning. It seems like a no-brainer, but can often be a step that gets missed, right? Because it is quite a big, undertake, right? A master plan community, right? And there's a lot of folks involved, but my big takeaway was really making sure that you get that marketing team involved from the very, very beginning and follow through with it so that that brand and vision isn't lost. And so how do you balance the needs of different buyer segments in one community without, losing a unified sense of place? If you have an example, that would also be
Yeah.
wonderful for us too.
Yeah, I think the best way to balance different demographics, because you are going to have multiple people, you may have your largest segment, maybe families, but you may have some mature buyers that also move in, right? How do you balance that? I 100% believe that it's through the lifestyle program, right? The experiences you can create. Lifestyle programming is, I would say, probably the least expensive thing around developing a community. It's an ongoing expense, right? A lot of times the HOA assessments cover it, but it's probably the least amount of expense with the biggest impact, right? And it also allows you to be nimble in things. So let's say your demographic mix, you thought there was going to be 60% families and 40% mature, but uh-oh, that's flipped and there's 60 mature, 40 families, right? Well, you can program differently, right? It's super easy to do that because that is not like you're not out there, tearing down amenities and putting them back up, for example. The biggest example or the best example I'll probably have of that is in my early days with Lakewood Ranch, the developer of Lakewood Ranch. I worked there for 6 years, and there was a community we had there. Mike Moser and the Starwood Land team purchased the remaining lots. I think there was like 1,000 lots left. And that team really felt like if that community could be more family oriented, it wasn't age restricted, but it was age targeted. So it was more of a mature empty nester buyer. But the Starwood Land team had a hunch that, hey, we think that the mature family or mature buyer, they have adult kids and they might follow them down to sunny Florida, right? You've heard of probably baby chasers where the grandparents chase the grandchildren, right? Well, this was kind of the reverse kind of, and this was way before COVID. So Starwood had the idea that we could get a family buyer, a younger buyer. They brought in some different home type for that. We opened an amenity that it was a beautiful amenity, but it wasn't anything grandiose, right? But it was centered around families and family using it. And then we created a lifestyle program with it. We also did a lifestyle program that was started to kind of mix and mingle the demographics, right? So what your traditional neighborhood might look like, where you might see someone older walking down the street with also, the family and that type of thing, because at the end of the day, we thought maybe this is what's missing, right? Like it can't be all mature. It can't like let's get this nice blended community together. Well, fast forward 9 months later, we had increased the sales by almost 70% in that community by doing those three things alone. So it's one of those things where you can change the way the sales are being impacted based on your programming and what you're putting out into the world.
Excellent. So what were some of those, I'm curious, what were some of those amenities that you did put in that community that were able to target several, demographics?
Yeah, it was a resort style pool, a playground. We did a clubhouse, made sure there was a barbecue grill where you can hang out with your family. We had a huge green space, and then we activated it, right? We also had a fitness center, of course, but then we activated it. And Starwood did a great job with the amenity because they made the pool deck extra large because there wasn't a place to come together for the entire community. So they made the pool deck, which I think honestly the deck is more important than the pool, the water,
Yeah.
honestly. So they made it extra large so that we could have events out there, right? People would bring their chairs out, we would have tables, and we'd have live music. And it just became so amazing. Kids swimming in the pool. This is a Friday night in Florida, and people were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so, we took what the amenity gave us and we enhanced it. We did some things like there was a neighboring golf club in the community, and we shared resources, pooled resources, and did a huge Fourth of July, Independence Day celebration with fireworks and everything. So now the community got to see it, but also the members of the country club, and for half the cost, right? For each of them. So yeah, those are some of the amenities. But the pool's big in Florida, of course. We made sure there was some splash elements in the pool, again, to attract the families. And then that green space was important with yard games and what have you.
Yes, sounds like a wonderful place to live. I'm just picturing what it looks like.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yes.
Palm trees,
Yes,
sunset, like just gorgeous, gorgeous.
yes. So, Monica, if you had to sum it up, what is the one thing that developers can do today to build communities that people genuinely love and remember?
Um, I think that understanding what your buyer wants, right? Understanding um, who your buyer is and what they want. I think also you've got to program it effectively, right?
Mhm.
and then you have to stay true to your brand promise. And so that sounds super simple, when you're trying to sum things up, but know your buyer, build what your buyer wants, program it effectively based on your buyer, and then stay true to your brand promise. And if you do that, you'll be successful.
Hmm. I love that. I think that this has been very insightful, and there's been some really good takeaways from, our conversation that our attendees could really use and apply. And I didn't ask you this at the beginning, and I want to ask it now. How did you get into the world of land development? What intrigued you to get into land development, and that what intrigued you to start your business that you're in
Um,
today?
I love that question. I'll tell you, I started, this will date me, but way back in the day with Standard Pacific Homes. Doesn't exist now. But I took a job with Standard Pacific Homes in San Jose, California. I spent 17 years of my life out in California in the Bay Area. And I fell in love with home building, with community building. I got to really understand a lot of different aspects of building from the DRE, Department of Real Estate work in California. I did a lot of legal work. I did a lot of construction work. I was on the project management team. So I've pretty much seen every vantage point of
Every
building,
stage. Yes.
yes, of every stage. And then when my husband and I left California, I was fortunate enough to take a role in Loudoun County, Virginia, for with a community called Willows Ford. And at the time, it was the best community in the country, voted the best community in the country, gorgeous place. And so I was there for about 4 years, and then left there, was recruited down to Lakewood Ranch to head up their amenity and lifestyle program, and was there 6 years. And that is really where I got the vision of creating this company, because with Lakewood Ranch, if you don't know much about it, it's a huge master plan, right? Like 50 square miles or something like that. Like it's crazy big,
Wow.
right? And so you work with multiple builders. We always used to joke that it was like, one of our villages was like a master plan community inside a master plan community, right? And so I really got to see the vantage point and the challenges that some of our developer partners and then also our builders were having, that maybe they could not afford, or they didn't have the expertise to bring on someone like me. And so in February of 21, I took the leap and started the business and had my first client the first week. And we're still with that client today, Newfield. Shout out to Newfield there. And I think they were Starwood and Newfield were like right there on the first week. But yeah, it's been great. We're now at 100 employees across the country. So we work all over the country. So
Yes,
it's been crazy, but great.
that is amazing. So looking 5 to 10 years ahead, what emerging forces like climate policy or shifting buyer expectations do you think will most, change how we design and program master plan communities?
Yeah, I think buyer expectations are going to be the biggest shift for us. We already see some of that,
Hmm.
but beyond that, it's going to be affordability. I mean, that is our big issue, right? Affordability right now with the interest rates where they are. A few years ago, you could afford a very nice home with a lower payment, right?
Yeah.
And so, that higher interest rate squeezes what the builders and developers can do, because the buyer has to pay more in interest, right? And so, which hurts affordability. And so I think that's the biggest challenge. One of the biggest challenges we have today is affordability, the interest rate, and where we're going with that.
Yes, that's very consistent too with, what we've heard as well. And then another question is, okay, in these current conditions, how do we create efficiencies as well? That is the topic of conversation, at least for me, when I'm talking to our developer clients. So I think that that is a
Mhm.
very important point that you made up. And then kind of, what is the most insightful ways that you've gathered feedback from the residents, like formal or informal, and actually folded that back into future phases for new master plans?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a lot of different things. It's surveys, focus groups.
Hmm.
I like surveys, but they're it's really kind of how you feel in the moment when you're doing the survey, right? It is a lot of talking to the community. It's also we had one community where we wanted to add a few more pocket parks and we had the space to do it. So we created a committee of the residents and they came out and helped us figure out what they wanted. And they went back and spoke to the residents and then, brought in the feedback and that type of thing and designed a pocket parks like they would want to see. So it truly gave them the opportunity to kind of create something within their community. So I think you can do a lot of different things where it's hands-on, speaking to people. I do a lot of social listening as well. So, my entire team does. So we're, you know, on social media looking for things, kind of what's the trend, but also what's the sentiment about that trend.
Yes.
So because when people are not, they don't know that you're surveying like that. It tends to be a little more honest in the moment.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I think that wraps up the majority of our questions that we have for Monica today. I did want to go ahead and get into sharing with you what we do here at TraceAir for those that aren't as familiar. I know we have clients on the call, but we have some others as well that maybe aren't as familiar. So, thank you, Monica, again for all of your time jumping into TraceAir. So, who we are. I think it's important to first clarify that we are a software company and we don't just work with developers, right? We work with home builders as well. Anybody that is moving dirt, assessing land, right? That is who we are assisting. So anything from your 2 acre multifamily development all the way to your 2,000, 3,000 acre or more development is where we're assisting. And we talked a little bit about, efficiencies, right? Um, with the changing times and with everything with the economy is the big question. Well, how do we create efficiency right now? Because it matters more than ever. So it's important to know that when we are scanning our client sites, they have that data available to them the very next day. That is really important when you are developing any kind of community. You are not waiting on reports that are a couple weeks old, right? Only to find that your site has changed. So that piece is critical there, that our customers are getting real-time data and not just visuals, right? Visuals tell a story. They can help paint a picture of maybe what's going on site. But what's more important is being able to quantify your dirt quantities, seeing where you're at. Have we completed utilities yet? Are we finished with grading? Things of that nature. So, really important there. And I wanted to just show a little bit about, how we can do that using our platform here. One thing that I always like to point out is that we have a historical record for all of the scans that we've done for our clients. This is really important. It's not if something goes wrong on site, it's when it's going to go wrong essentially. So you never know, right? So having that documentation is really key here. And what I see being used most from our developer clients are a couple of tools. First one I want to get into is actually our cut fill balance tool, right? These are huge sites. You're dealing with a lot of dirt, and it's really important to stay on top of that. So using some of our tools like our plane and track tool, we can actually run a cut fill balance anywhere on site. And this is going to tell us approximately, accurate to 3 centimeters, I should mention, how much dirt we have in that specific area. Is this good soil that we can use? If so, let's find a different home for it so we can balance it. There are times, right, where you might run into spoils where you cannot use that dirt. It's important to be able to measure it so that you can get ahead and know, okay, if this is the approximate, cubic yards of dirt I have here, and this is what the rate is going for in terms of hauling it off, I can accurately budget for that instead of being surprised down the road, right? And ensure that you are getting billed correctly, right? Because these things can add up over time. A lot of times we like to think of that 100, 200K dirt bus, but if you are getting overcharged by a couple hundred or a couple thousand cubic yards here and there, that's going to add up over time. So it's really important to be able to stay on top of this and have that single source of truth. Another tool that I see being used quite often with our developers and our home builders as well is our lot viewer feature. So these sites are huge that we're flying, right? You're going to want to look at the cut and fill on an overall site basis, but as your community starts to develop and your grading starts to come to an end, it's even more important to get the breakdown of the cut and fill on a per lot basis. So you can see, we can zoom in here and it will actually give us the approximate cubic yards, whether we're short or if we have an excess amount of dirt here. So really easy to just come in here, right? If you're looking at a community that has 1,000 lots, that's a lot of data to look at. So we do try to make it as simple and easy as possible with just giving you the breakdown right here. So you can assess, okay, are we really 100% complete or are we more of like along the lines of 80% complete? The as-built are also big, right? Whether you are a developer who is going to be selling this off to a home builder, or if you are the home builder yourself doing your own self-development, you have to make sure that all of your lots are within tolerance. Point 2, point 3 is typically what I hear across the country. But whatever your tolerance is, right, you can zoom in and actually see, okay, am I above? Am I below? Am I right there? And it is up to our clients and whether or not it meets the standard of their site. So we're providing the raw data so that they can make the decisions that work best for their community. So zooming out a little bit, right, we can kind of assess what the site looks like. I do have a beautiful picture here of a site that is more along the lines of being complete, right? We can see we have vertical that's happening now. We're finished with grading. This is really nice as well, not only for the development team, but your sales and marketing team, your vertical team as well, to all be on the same page about what's going on, within the project. So I think that's very important to know is that we're not just assisting in the raw development, we're assisting in the vertical space as well. We now have TraceWalk, which is our vertical tool. And if you are interested in that, then you can certainly reach out to us as well. But not just solely land development now, we're touching everything from land acquisition all the way to vertical, which is critical there. And lastly, I do want to show our 360 panorama tool here. So we provide one of these with every scan, but we often find that with our large master plan community developers, they want to be able to add in more to capture, maybe different amenities that they have going in, as well as other active construction areas on site. So we can provide more than one panorama, and often do for our master plan communities that we're flying. This is actually a public link, so you can copy and paste this and send it out to partners, stakeholders, anyone that might benefit from this. Sales and marketing, they absolutely love this tool. So if you happen to be sales and marketing and you're watching this and you know that TraceAir is flying some of your projects, I would ask the development team about the 360 panorama because you can actually get some great use from this as well. Okay. We do have some other tools, but I think for today's call, I will go ahead and wrap it up here, and we will see what other types of questions that we have coming in. So I do see we have a question for Monica, actually. So this person writes, Monica, in your experience, what's the most overlooked early decision in a master plan that ends up having the biggest impact on long-term resident satisfaction?
Let's see. I'll answer that from my vantage point, from amenities, lifestyle, programming, right? From my vantage and what I deal with. I think it's whether or not there's going to be staff on site, right? If you're going to have a lifestyle director, community manager, or what have you, and designing for those spaces for those people. Um, it's not sexy at all, my answer, but it's true. So, and then making sure, for example, so if you know you're going to have a lifestyle director on site, you're going to for that. Budget for that to start when you actually start sales, not when you have your first resident in, because your lifestyle director should be part of your sales program to make sure
Mhm.
that your buyers are understanding the lifestyle program that you're putting together and they get the energy from the lifestyle. So, and you can, use that lifestyle director to put on some marketing events, for example.
Sure.
But I would say making sure you understand what space needs would be for your on-site staff in terms of amenities.
Sure. And we did get another really good question that came in for you. And it is, what is one amenity or placemaking trend that you think developers are over investing in and one that they're not investing in enough?
Mm. I get asked about trends all the
Yeah.
time, and it's a hard one to answer. I mean, I get the question about, oh, what's the hottest new amenity, and it's like, well, what's your demographic? And it's really a hard question to answer because are they over investing? I don't know. I mean, if you're in Texas, you're probably not building a community these days without a lazy river. Maybe you're even throwing in a lagoon and there's some amenity wars going on in Texas. If you are in Florida, you probably really can't overinvest in a swimming pool, for example.
That
I
makes
think
sense.
one of the things that they are not investing enough in would be wellness and fitness.
Yeah.
And for some reason, we think that that doesn't sell because a lot of times we judge by, is the fitness center empty and why am I building this,
Mhm.
space where nobody goes to.
Right.
I
Right.
think you have to teach people how to use space, right? You have to get them comfortable in the space. So what we do is we have a program. We work with a internal company here that helps us activate fitness spaces. So we put personal trainers. We do fitness
Oh,
one-on-one
wow.
101s, right? So tell me, not everybody's comfortable in a gym, right? You got to
Right.
be, you got to get comfortable. So if you know you're going to walk in and you're going to have this, person there that's smiling and can teach you how to use that, and now you want to go back, it's kind of why we go to our yoga class, right? Because we
Right.
like the instructor. So it's the same concept, and you can do that in your community fitness center. I don't think a lot of my clients are now investing in this, but I don't think a lot
Mhm.
of people or a lot of developers are investing or builders are investing in that level of fitness, and it can be a true sales driver.
Right. I love that. And I'm also thinking too about, other creative ways that maybe you can get people involved in, the wellness space, right? And really focus on the fitness and health. And what I see too in some communities are, like the nature trails and the
Mhm.
dog
Yeah.
walk, the paths, right? And the dog
Right.
parks, which I think are wonderful too, because then, there's a need there, okay, to take your pet out and get exercise, but if you create a beautiful walking trail that's next to a dog park as well, that makes people, I think, want to get outside to even a little bit more, right? So
Yeah,
I think that's
absolutely.
wonderful that you mentioned the wellness and fitness space for
Yeah.
our audience because I think it can be overlooked.
Yeah, and another thing we don't take into account enough, and we try to do this here, is the journey from your house to that dog park, right? A lot,
Mhm.
you mentioned beautiful trail, right? Like,
Yeah,
are there things we can do along the trail, especially if it's for
right.
families, right? Are there things you can stop and, maybe that entices your child to get out and like because they can, they've got an extra thing to do. Maybe they can look at a butterfly under a magnifying glass or something like that, right? Like it's one of those things where like what's the journey from the homes to the amenities as well?
Yeah,
Like let's entice people to use more. I mean, we're building it, like we're spending the
absolutely.
money on it. Let's entice people to use it.
Yes, wonderful. I see we have another question came in, and this one is related to TraceAir and what we do. So the question is, can I invite other people into the TraceAir platform? Well, it's unlimited amount of users. So what we see most commonly is that land development team, but also bringing in the engineering team as well, because it's not just the developers that are benefiting from our data that we provide. It is the engineers as well. I actually work very, very closely with a development company here in Texas, and all of their engineers are involved in TraceAir. They all use it just as much as the developers do because they also have to keep track of the dirt movement and what the contractors are doing, all of that stuff. And if there is redesign and things like that that needs to happen, then we can actually export our data into a file that is compatible with their CAD, which is excellent. So if anybody's on this call that is a current customer that doesn't yet have their engineer in TraceAir, I highly recommend it. It's free, no charge to you, and everybody's just going to get even more benefit from having the same, having that same level of access to the data that you're all working on together. So that was a great question here. Let me see if we have any more. I think we're running out of time. So I will just go ahead and, wrap it up for us today. Again, thank you so much, Monica, for your time and all of the wonderful insight that you shared with us. And for our audience, thank you for joining. You will be given a survey right at the end. It's intended for us to make sure that we are, hitting the right points, that the workflow is good for you guys. So please, any feedback that you can provide for us will be greatly appreciated. So that is a wrap for today's webinar. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.